Welcome to another Slice of Sci-Fi video review. I'm Noah Richmond.
And I'm Daren Goldsvig.
And today we are talking about Avengers!
Age of Ultron.
Ultron in the flesh.
No matter who wins or loses, trouble always comes around.
Getting right off to the bat here, I gotta say that I was excited, and I think you were as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Avengers is just one of the best superhero films of all time. It was certainly one of my favorites, if not my very favorite, and so impressive the way that Joss Whedon in the first film was able to really bring all those elements together, introduce those characters, keep it serious but inject just the right amount of humor, and it really became a phenomenon. It really became something that was just approachable to people who knew the backstories, people who hadn't seen the other movies. So, Age of Ultron, what should we say about this one?
Well, you know, actually going back what you said about the first Avengers, when I went to go see the movie the first time, I was kind of apprehensive because it's like, God, is he going to be able to pull it off?
Right.
But because it was Joss Whedon, and if anybody could have done it, it was him. And I was blown away by it. I think like a lot of people were.
Yeah.
And so obviously from that point on, a lot of moviegoers just maybe kept a closer eye on the series more so than before. You had Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is a show that started up after that, and which really helped massage that storyline and
Right.
help grow it. And of course, I guess the question is, would you have to watch it to appreciate it? You know, I don't really think you do, but it certainly helps. But yeah, so the excitement was there. And going into the Age of Ultron, I can't say of a movie in the last maybe 20 years that I was more excited to see.
Right,
So,
sure.
I mean, what did
I think
you
a lot of people are. Yeah, so the end result is, we just said all the build-up, and I think we're hardly alone. I think this is most of the world had roughly similar experience, and I think this is going to absolutely shatter box office numbers. And right off the bat, it's important to say it's Joss Whedon, and it's the same crew together again, and right there and then, it's at the very minimum going to be a worthwhile, fun movie. And I would say it's fun.
Yeah.
It is fun, but does it live up to the previous film? Well, for myself, somebody that hasn't been keeping up with Season 2 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., somebody that doesn't have a lot of background with the Avengers comic books, I felt a bit lost right off the bat and felt like I stayed a bit lost all the way through to the end.
Wow.
I mean, not that I had no idea what was going on, but that I felt like it just felt a little rushed to me, and I felt like there were a lot of things I felt I wanted more exposition and explanation about, and it really seemed like it needed to keep itself moving with a lot of action and sequences to pack in everything that it was trying to do in the short time that it had to do it. So from my own experience, I felt like, wow, this seems like this would be a really good TV miniseries, but it feels like it's been really compacted down into too short of a time frame.
And that's kind of an interesting point. As somebody who is familiar with the source material, it wasn't hard for me to kind of to understand what was going on. And of course, because I'm also an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. fan, that certainly helped. But it will be interesting to hear somebody who's not as familiar with those parts of the story if they're going to be lost like you say you were. And you're more inclined to know what's going on than, say, the average filmgoer, I imagine. I admit that there were parts that felt rushed, and I don't know if that's more of a kind of feedback, or at least the result of editing down the running time, because it clocks in, I believe, a little over 130 minutes, which is fairly long.
Right.
But in my mind, it probably should have been closer to probably 160 minutes to meet. Well, and it does feel rushed at times, but I think for the most part, it felt, at least while it's being rushed, it felt good though, because these are the storyline was so exciting, and I was really enjoying every part of it. But again, I'm more familiar with the source material. I know the backstory with Scarlet Witch. I know the backstory of Quicksilver, and so and obviously there's differences with that as well that were changed out. But that's not part of this discussion. But yeah, I loved it. I didn't like it as much as the previous Avengers because it just seemed like there was, as you mentioned, the rushed parts and then misplaced humor, being forced a lot.
Yeah, I certainly hard to say if it was a lot, but it was definitely noticeable. Whereas the first time around, almost all the humor really seemed very organic and seemed very funny. Yeah, it definitely seemed like you had insert humor here parts of the story.
And that was my biggest takeaway after leaving the movie. I mean, I was enthused about the movie. I thought, agreeing with you, it's going to do a lot of money. I just don't think it was as good as it could have been, and I don't know if that's because of the Jaws having to edit it down. I'd sure love to see a longer version of it. I'm sure there's a director's cut in the near future, but it's a lot to accomplish because you have all these storylines that are going on behind the main storyline, what we're watching, and because it's setting it up for future movies.
Right. And
that's a really complicated thing to do. Because when they make a movie, they try to make it so it'll appeal to the, maybe the layman in terms of moviegoers. So they'll appreciate what's going on. And, I kind of believe they may be a little lost. So.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it'll certainly be very interesting to see what the overall reactions are. I don't think you're going to see too many people saying that this is a waste of time. You still have all the basic elements that you want to see on the screen, but I think with the kind of enthusiasm that's been generated by the previous Marvel films, this one really feels more like another Marvel film rather than another hit it out of the ballpark.
Yeah, I just wonder if maybe Jaws just bit off more than he can chew. Like I said, I love the movie. I just didn't love it as much as the previous movie. It just felt incomplete, I guess.
Yeah.
And so.
Well, I guess for me, I do have to compare it a bit with this past summer when we had X-Men: Days of Future Past. That was another sequel film that introducing a whole lot of different characters, a whole lot of different storylines, a whole lot of different timelines. And I had some feelings of being lost in that one as well. But at the same time, somehow it managed to give me... I still managed to really enjoy the whole film, even if I didn't always remember, okay, who's this character and what's their power and why can they do that?
Maybe it did a better job explaining.
One thing I thought it did is it did a much better job introducing this character of Quicksilver.
It did.
Days of Future Past, I just found, it was completely engaging, whereas I felt like these new characters were just like, okay, who are these people? I hardly even understand why they can do what they can do.
And there lies my comment about the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I think if you're a fan of that show and you watch it as much as, every week and you're caught up, you're going to at least understand a little bit more about why things have happened that's leading up to this Avengers, the Age of Ultron, and it certainly makes it easier following along. The beginning sequence at the start of the movie, if anything, that's the sequence that really felt incomplete at the beginning, and if anything, that's a part that links directly to the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So, but I'm not trying to be overly negative about it. We have to be honest about the actual film. And if I had to say, what would I give it out of stars out of 5? I would probably give it maybe 3.5 out of 5. And I think that's a pretty good review.
I'm afraid I'm one of the not love it peoples. I didn't feel like it was a waste of my time. I certainly wouldn't want to discourage anybody from going out and seeing it. I hope it does become the biggest movie of all time. But on the other hand, I can't say that it... Not only did I not love it as much as the first Avengers, but as I said, I didn't even really love it as much as last year's X-Men film.
Wow.
So.
Well, and we have to be honest about it because Joss Whedon directed it, everything he's done so far, at least maybe, I've appreciated and enjoyed, and except for the first episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which was awful.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, just looking at the bigger picture, there's a lot to accomplish here, and maybe it should have been a course of over, maybe 1 or 2 movies, because there was so many plot points that it had to hit on.
Right.
And at the same time, you have to engage the viewer and make sure they're interested in following along. And it's, as I said, if somebody's familiar with the storylines, it's a little easier to do it. So maybe it didn't seem as lost for those that are familiar with it, like myself. So I didn't maybe see the things you're seeing. But again, I have to appreciate that, because you have to always assume that this may be a first time somebody's watching the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can't imagine if you just picked that movie up by itself and watched it, you would be lost. That's what I got to
Right.
say. I mean, because there's way too many questions. You know what? And also, as we're talking about Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, I didn't really feel like there was a vital reason as to why they were there, even after watching the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., because it's kind of explained. But it never really felt. They never felt like an important part of the team. In Scarlet Witch and the Avengers, in the comic books, she's always been just a huge influence and part of the story. So and maybe
Right.
she will be in the future movies.
Right. Yeah, and for me, I'm still walking away from it. I'm still wondering, what exactly does she do? I'm still a little confused about exactly what her powers are. I think I'm going to need to go spend a little time on the internet educating myself.
Yeah, I mean, that's that. And if you look at it that point of view, then the movie's failing from that point, because you don't have clear idea what she is. I mean, we
Right.
know that she emits mystical powers, and she's basically, I look at her as like a female Doctor Strange, except in the comic books, her father is Magneto, and Quicksilver is, her brother, and so Magneto's the father of Quicksilver as well. But because of the legalities, that storyline has been dissolved, obviously. So,
Right.
but this, and here we're looking at this movie and talking about the many characters. Well, as it goes forward along, and we have Infinity Gauntlet, there's going to be more characters, because you have Spider-Man
Yeah.
coming on, and you have the Guardians of the Galaxy. So I'm just.
It's going to be interesting. It's definitely going to be interesting to see
Well,
where
did they
all this
already?
goes.
And did they already announce that they're going to have 2 parts to that movie?
Yeah.
So
yeah, they've got a 9-month shoot ahead of them.
man. Well, I mean, it's a lot to accomplish, but
Yeah.
it's still it's a good time to be a comic book fan, because these movies.
Yeah, amazing time. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, these movies that they couldn't have dreamed about making 20 years ago. So I'm very appreciative of that. And still, even though we're picking it apart, I did walk away from the movie just loving it, and I'm going to see it again, because I love the fact of where the storyline is going to go, because I'm a huge fan of the Infinity Gauntlet.
Right.
So
Yeah, for myself, I think I'm probably going to want to see it again after I'm caught up on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah.
And maybe done a little more reading about some of these characters, get some clarity on what everybody's background was.
What did you think about Morton Downey Jr. as Tony Stark? Because, I got to be honest with you, his kind of that cockiness, and he's being,
Oh, Robert Downey Jr.?
as Tony Stark, it's kind of
Uh-huh.
getting kind of, I don't know, old. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just because.
I just honestly didn't feel like any of the characters were developed enough for it to
Well,
even...
likable, I guess, is the way I'm looking for it. Because
Yeah. Well, one thing that I did think was interesting about the film was they kind of intentionally brought up the question of, is he a likable person?
no,
because
it's true.
the reason that Ultron is evil is because he's modeled on Stark's own personality, or
yes.
his own brain patterns.
Well, and he was born out of that too, as you know.
Yeah, but again, that was something that confused me in the film, that, okay, so why is Ultron wanting to kill people? Okay, well, Ultron's wanting to kill people because he comes from Tony Stark's brain patterns, and Tony Stark has a hard time distinguishing between virtuous behavior and destructive behavior.
Right.
And therefore, Ultron's totally destructive. And then there's all this something about bringing in Pinocchio and saying,
No
I got
strings.
no strings. And I felt like, okay, there's something interesting here,
Right.
but I don't feel like I'm getting it.
Yeah, well, I agree with that. I mean, there's some deep concepts at play and that's the meat that I don't think we fully got.
Right.
Because kind of a crazy robot that tries to, to destroy the world is kind of neat, and specifically when it's designed and from Tony Stark, who's an egomaniac who always wants to do everything himself, and that's a really cool concept because now he has to come to grips that not only does this robot destroying the world, but it's really a robot based on his personality and wave patterns, and so
Right.
yeah, I wish they'd have developed that a little more, but again, director's
But
cut.
it's a fun, yeah, exactly. I think what we're looking forward to is seeing what does the director's cut show, and for me, combination of how different is it going to be when we see an extended cut, plus once I'm caught up on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. to fill me in a little more, am I going to see this as a different film at that point? But for right now, my feeling was it was fun. I don't feel like I really need to rush back to the theater to see it a second time right now.
Well, that's an honest review. I mean, I don't think we're going to be alone in that assessment. So,
Right.
and I'm just because I'm a huge fan of this genre and the characters doesn't mean I have to be blind about it. I have to be honest with the fact that I expected a lot out of this movie. It was on my radar from the beginning of when I first heard about it, there was going to be a sequel. So, lots of anticipation. Maybe we built it up too much. I mean, maybe there was just expected too much out of it because the last one was so good.
Right.
So when you do that, you're always going to be a little disappointed. So, but for the most part, I liked it. So, can't say I'd want to marry it.
Okay.
If that's silly, but yeah. So,
All right. Liked it, can't say we'd want to marry it. That's a review for Avengers Age of Ultron.
yes. So go watch it. Just stay engaged.
Read up on your Marvel comics. Be sure you know what everybody is before you go in, and enjoy. And thank you for watching Slice of Sci-Fi.
See you on the next bout.